goodness, I am on. Thank you. Good evening. I want to welcome you all here tonight. Certainly appreciate everyone coming and spending some time with us. We simply want to give you the formal welcome to the 22nd Annual Missouri Livestock Symposium. I'm Andy Jackson, and I'm simply a member of the Missouri Livestock Symposium Committee. And on behalf of the committee, we thank you for being with us. The first symposium was held the first weekend following Thanksgiving in 1999, and we're proud to be coordinating and orchestrating the 22nd Annual Symposium. Little did the founders, Gary Mathis and Bruce Lane, who are credited with being the founders of this event, little did they, nor the original planning committee, have any idea that this program would continue for this many years, but we're pleased and proud that it does. Amazingly, it continues to grow. So we welcome you with the earnest hope that you will enjoy the program this evening, and of course the program that we have planned for tomorrow. There's an energetic group of worker bees, in case you haven't seen them, but they work hard to bring you an outstanding group of speakers and certainly a great trade show. If you have any questions or need assistance in any way, please contact any of them. You might see them wearing their uniform. We all have a uniform, the bright yellow shirts and black jackets. We call ourselves the worker bees, and we're just buzzing around. Assisting me tonight is the Missouri Livestock Symposium Committee Chair, Gary Mathis. And do applaud our family. He's hiding in the shadows over there. We're pleased to have with us this evening Dr. Robert Webb, who is Superintendent of the Kirksville R3 School District. We're fortunate that Dr. Webb came to our Kirksville community from Alamosa, Colorado, and he brings with him extensive educational leadership experiences. He's a high achiever in his academic efforts. He has a bachelor's degree from Black Hills State in Spearfish, South Dakota, a graduate degree from the University of Wyoming in Laramie, and a doctorate of education in educational leadership. In addition to his higher education influences, I understand that Robert Webb is certainly well-grounded in agriculture, with his youthful experiences on family-owned sheep production ranches, where he sheared sheep, and he tied the wool fleeces, and he worked hard, and he learned about the very basics of agriculture. Perhaps that's the base of his strong work ethic that he has brought to Missouri. Please welcome Dr. Robert Webb.
Thank you, everybody. Yes, I did grow up in Wyoming, and I however, love it here because it reminds me so much of the families that I grew up with and that I worked with. All my cousins and uncles did run cattle and sheep, but I didn't tie my fleece. I got the best job in the world, and that was tromping the wool in the 8-foot gunny sacks back in the day. And I come out lamb covered and tip covered, so I get it all. I really did enjoy it with that. Right. But I, on behalf of the more than 2,600 or 2,500 students and about 500 staff members and all of the school board members in the Kirksville R3 School District, do appreciate you and allowing us to host this. I'm not sure if all 22 years have been held in this building, but the 3 years I've been in Kirksville, it has been here. Last year I didn't get to attend, obviously, because it was online. But I really do think that this type of event is very closely tied to the heart of our district. Obviously, we're about learning, and every one of the sessions that are being offered are about that. And those speakers, they're teaching all of us things that obviously are important. And I think that most of you, if not all of you, are all part of that unsung group of first responders. If it weren't for you, all of those things that we are in the city trying to hide behind or not getting appreciation for the food, the very basics that we need to have in order to sustain life are obviously related to you. And I appreciate that. all of my cousins and uncles and aunts, I have roots that go back actually to Jackson County, Missouri, back in the 1840s. So I do consider this part of home, but all of my cousins who are in northeast Wyoming still are ranchers, mostly cattle, some sheep. I think they got tired of counting wool too, but mostly cattle. And so I do have an affinity for what you do. I sometimes kid my staff because I do still ride. I don't ride horses, I ride a motorcycle, but I do it because I need to change the air in my head, and it still works the same way. But on behalf of the district again, I appreciate you, I thank you, and I hope that what happens in the next couple of days, or today and tomorrow, will be of use to you, because it is part of what we do as the Kirksville Community School District in extending our services to you. So thank you, have a good time, and appreciate what you do and who you are. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Webby. We truly appreciate you being here, and thank you for your continued support. And yes, I do believe all 22 years it's been here on the campus here in Kirksville. On behalf of the MLS committee, I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you. We're glad that you're here tonight. Hope that you enjoyed a good meal. I understand it was a good volume of servings, so hopefully you didn't go away hungry. Our ag industry certainly continues to have challenges with weather and economics and inflationary costs and political regulations, international conflicts, but we also must always remember that we do receive the rewards from our bountiful harvest, from our successful yields and research, improved genetics, the productive livestock herds, certainly the multi-generational family farming operations, and the caring communities that we're blessed with. But for this Friday night, tomorrow Saturday, we just encourage you to sit back and share some laughter and share some optimism, share some pride, share some information, some common interest in agriculture, and just have a good time together. And it's just wonderful that we can all come together again after our year of isolation with COVID. So at this time, I have some neat folks that I would want you all to meet. Dr. John Middleton is currently Assistant Vice Chancellor at our University of Missouri. This gentleman earned a bachelor's degree in veterinary science, doctor of veterinary medicine, and a PhD in veterinary science from Washington State College of Veterinary Medicine. He completed a large animal internal medicine residency at WSU, became board certified by the American College of Veterinary Internal Medicine, received a National Mastitis Council Distinguished Service Award for the presidential performance, and the Zoetis Award for Veterinary Research Excellence. He served as chair of the American Veterinary Medicine Association. I know that as AVMA. My brother-in-law, they go to the AVMA conferences, and I've heard about that for many, many times, but he served as chair of the Council on Research with that organization. We truly thank Dr. Munchoy for asking this veterinarian to come and be with us tonight. The veterinarian, the educator, the administrator is going to provide some remarks on behalf of Mizzou. Please welcome Dr. John Middleton.
Thank you, Andy. I don't think I recognize that guy, but I'll play him on TV. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Some of you have probably seen me here before, actually, as that educator and veterinarian. But tonight I'm here on behalf of the president of the university to welcome you to the Livestock Symposium. This is a great honor for the university to hold these types of events, and I think it exemplifies our land-grant mission, which is to really take the research that our faculty do and translate it into things that livestock producers like yourselves can do. And our inaugural achievement award winner from the University of Missouri tonight, Dave Patterson, sort of exemplifies how we take research and translate that into something like the Show Me Select Development Program, which is then used throughout the state for bettering our livestock production systems. I'm going to highlight a few other things that we're doing at the University of Missouri. Currently, we, as some of you may recognize, have opened a new facility on our campus. So in October, we opened a Next Gen Precision Health initiative with a Next Gen Precision Health building. And you might say, well, what does that have to do with rural America? Well, one of the things that we recognize both in veterinary medicine and human medicine is we do have gaps in healthcare, both in veterinary healthcare and human healthcare in rural areas of our states in the United States. And we have taken that seriously, and as part of that Next Gen Precision Health initiative, not only are we looking at individualized medicine, but one of the pillars of that organization and that institute is to serve the rural areas better with healthcare. And through that, we're also working with our School of Medicine to enhance rural healthcare. And that initiative was kicked off in October. We had speakers there, including Senator Roy Blunt, who the building is named after, and helped appropriate some of the funding for that. But we also had the director of the NIH there, which was a great honor to have the director of the NIH speak at the opening of the building at the University of Missouri campus, and I think illustrates the importance of these initiatives that we're undertaking. Another piece that's perhaps more relevant to you is we're also building a new veterinary medical diagnostic lab on our campus, and the state has funded part of that, and so we're very appreciative for that funding as well. Certainly, if we look at our Extension and Engagement Week that just finished up, over the last 3 years we've taken on a number of initiatives. The first one in collaboration with the Missouri Department of Agriculture is to really look at broadband distribution throughout the state. We then looked at workforce development, and as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we are now looking at rural healthcare. So this year's Extension and Engagement Week at the University of Missouri looked at health disparities and how we deliver healthcare to rural parts of the state. I lost my place in my speech here. And so through industry partnerships, through the work of our faculty, the work of our extension agents, we are helping advance knowledge and production of livestock throughout the state. And so I welcome you to the Missouri Livestock Symposium on behalf of the University of Missouri and on behalf of President Choi, and I hope you have an enjoyable meeting throughout today and tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Middleton. Certainly do appreciate the support of the university and the strong leadership that you are certainly providing for our land-grant institution. Another individual that I'm so pleased to be able to bring to the podium is Chris Chin. Chris Chin is a fifth-generation Missouri farmer from our neighboring town of Clarence. She was named Director of the Missouri Department of Ag in January of 2017. At that time, Missouri Governor Eric Greitens was in charge of the state. And Chris continues to serve in the administration, now with Governor Mike Patterson. Chris is certainly a leader on local, state, and national levels. She's worked to advance our ag industry forward. She served on Missouri and American Farm Bureau Federation boards, Pork Association Board, State Fair Commission, Missouri Wine and Grape, certainly Missouri Agriculture and Small Business Development. And now she's a member of the National Association of State Departments of Ag. She's an alumnus of the Ag Leaders of Tomorrow, the ALOT program, as well as the Partners in Ag. But Chris has been a trailblazer in agricultural advocacy. I can remember when things were beginning to certainly become very important. Social media was an important thing, and she worked tirelessly to help bridge that gap between farmers and consumers. At that time, she was named one of 4 faces of farming and ranching by the U.S. Farmer and Ranchers Alliance. The personal side of Chris, she resides on her family farm when she's not in Jeff City or in other many places around the world. With her husband, Kevin, they have a farming operation in Clarence. And we're just so pleased that Chris continues to work with Governor Mike Patterson, and she accepted our invitation to be able to come to be with us tonight at the symposium. Welcome, Chris Chin.
Well, thank you. It's great to be back in Kirksville, and it's great to see people in person again. It's been a long 2 years since the last time I was here. As Andy mentioned, I was actually supposed to be out of the country today with the governor. We were going to be traveling to Israel on a trade mission, because at the Department of Agriculture, we are very focused on making sure that we bring value back to Missouri agriculture. We know that trade is a very important part of that. So we were going to meet with some companies that we're already doing business with, as well as some new companies who we were hoping would like to do business with Missouri. But that little thing called COVID kind of changed all of our plans. So lucky for me, I get to be here, and I will be home for Christmas. I don't have that threat now hanging over my head. My husband was very happy. But we've had a lot of good things happening at the Department of Agriculture. I've seen many of my team members here today. Dr. Steve Struberg, Dr. Collup is here as well. I know many of you know Dr. Collup up in this area. Davin Althoff, my Ag Business Development Director, is also with me, as well as Danielle High, who is my legislative liaison. And we know how important this event is to the livestock industry in the state of Missouri, and that's why so many of my team members make it an important part of their day and their month of December so we can get up here. One of the things that Davin and I have spent a lot of time working on this year was an announcement that the governor made a couple of weeks ago about the American Foods Group bringing a beef processing plant to the state of Missouri. Some of you may have heard about that. I've been asked about it a couple of times while I've been walking through the crowd tonight. We're really excited about this opportunity. American Foods Group is the #5 beef processor in the country. There's a large gap between the #4 and the #5 processor. But this company is a family business, and they are focused on making sure that they are able to buy directly from the farmer, and they also buy from sale barns as well. You can sell as few as one head of cattle to them, or you can sell an entire trailer load of cattle if you choose. So we're really excited about this opportunity. We went back in, was it November or October, Davin? We actually went out and saw their Green Bay packing facility, and it was a state-of-the-art facility. It was an all-enclosed under-roof facility right in the middle of Green Bay, Wisconsin. There was absolutely no smell. We walked through the barn that day, there was over 1,000 head of cattle in it, and you could not smell any of the cattle outside of the barn or inside of the barn. The processing facility, when it's up and running, will process 2,400 head of cattle a day. Half of the cattle will be cull cows, and the other half will be fat cattle. It will employ about 1,300 Missourians, and the average salary will be $60,000. So we're really excited to welcome the American Foods Group to the state of Missouri. But more importantly, we're excited that we're going to be able to bring value back to our Missouri farms and ranches that have cattle. This is going to be an opportunity for people to decide if they want to start finishing more cattle out, or if they just want to find a place to go with their cull cows, they have that opportunity. But what is really exciting is that many families are going to have that opportunity to bring that next generation back home by making an expansion, by feeding out some of their cattle, instead of exporting all of our cattle. We're the #2 beef cow state in the country, and that's something we're extremely proud of. And so we are excited to keep some of that value back here in Missouri and have the opportunity to have a bright spot in the cattle industry. For so many years, the cattle industry has had so many low times, and we really see this as a bright spot for the cattle industry. So those are just a few of the things that our team has been working on. Trade is very important, but also keeping the value of our ag products here in Missouri so that we can make sure that that next generation is able to stay at home on the farm or the ranch if they choose to. It's been a pleasure to be here with you this evening. If you ever need anything, we are your Department of Agriculture, so please reach out to our team, whether it's the Animal Health team, our Grain Division, our Ag Business Development team. We are here to serve you and to help you. The thing we like to say is we want to make sure that we don't get in your way so that you can get your job done, but we want to help you when you need assistance. So if there's ever anything that we can do, please let us know, because we'd be happy to help. Have a great symposium, and I hope that you gain a lot of good information over today and tomorrow that you can take back to your operations and put into use. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Certainly appreciate the great support that the Department of Ag does for our event here. There's another guest that we have with us tonight, and his name is David Doctorian. He's the Assistant State Conservationist for Partnerships and Initiatives with the Missouri Natural Resources Conservation Service. He works to maintain NRCS conservation partnerships, grants, and agreements with partners that are both internally and externally. Additionally, the position is tasked with developing new partnerships across the state beyond with individuals and entities that are interested in conservation. He has had previous work as a soil health specialist in Northeast Missouri, and of course he's also trained NRCS staff and partner employees on soil health principles while teaching soil health concepts to certainly the Missouri farmers and ranchers and landowners. David lives on a farm outside of Macon, where he and his family operate a grain and livestock operation. Please welcome David Doctorian.
Thank you, Ms. Andy. Appreciate that welcome, and welcome everyone to the symposium. Look forward to all that is planned for us over the next day. You know, when you think about Missouri agriculture, you can't help but think about the fact that we are a partnership state. And I think this symposium represents that in the best possible way. When you look at the groups that have come together to support this event for us, to allow us to gather tonight and tomorrow to learn more about our industry, to learn more about what we're doing. You know, NRCS is very pleased to be able to partner with the symposium to help bring this to Northeast Missouri. And so I'm here representing NRCS, and specifically Scott Edwards, our state conservationist. He has a very keen interest in what's happening here tonight, although he couldn't make it. And so, you know, I'm thankful that we could get together and do this, and I'm thankful that you have taken time to be here. I was thinking earlier, as I saw those yellow shirts walking around and being busy with what they had to do, you know, there's an old story about the guy that found the turtle sitting on top of the corner post. And he said to his son, "What do you think about that turtle on top of that corner post?" His son said, I don't know, Dad." He said, "Well, here's what you should know. There's a turtle that's definitely had some help." Right? And so when we see these things come together, we know that there's a lot of help that's gone into it. So I want to make sure that I say thank you to all of those of you that are wearing a yellow shirt tonight or have previously worn one. I want to say thank you to all the vendors that have come to support this event, and certainly to all of you that are here. NRCS is represented in all 114 counties in the state. You're going to hear some things in the next couple of days that may cause you to come see us at one of those USDA service centers. I want you to know that we're there to serve, to help you accomplish your goals, to be more efficient, be more profitable, and at the same time conserve the natural resources that we're stewards of. Glad to be part of this workshop and symposium. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Certainly appreciate the continued support. There's a few individuals that I would like to recognize at this time, and I ask that these individuals stand and be recognized, remain standing, and the audience could hold their applause, and then we will recognize them all together. These are certainly important guests that are with us. I think we have Mr. Danny Busick, 3rd District Missouri State Representative, and his wife Sandy, perchance, is with him. Danny is back here. Mr. Greg Sharp, State Representative from the 4th District. Greg is over here. Greetings to Teresa. I'm sorry she's not with you. Mr. Lewis Riggs, I think, is with us from the 5th District. He had planned to be with us. I think his wife Ann was to be with us. I'm not sure if I can see. Mr. Ed Lewis, District 6th State Representative from our neighbor to the south. Mr. Mark Thompson, Adair County Commissioner, and his wife Mindy, I think they had planned to be with us. Mr. Mark Shahan, Adair County Commissioner, actually presiding commissioner, and Charlene was going to be with him. Mr. Bill King, who is Adair County Commissioner. We have all of our commissioners supporting us tonight. Mr. Michael Crouch, who is Director of Northeast Region of the University of Missouri Extension. Dr. Chad Higgins, Associate Vice Chancellor for Extension and Engagement from the University of Missouri. David Baker, Founder and Worker bee for David Baker Counseling or Consulting. Mr. Brian Nichols, who is a staff representative for Congressman Sam Graves. Ms. Peyton Ruddy, staff representative for Senator Roy Blunt. I am Dr. Tim Walston, Truman State University, with the Division of Science and Math. And Carol Kellum from KTVO. Please recognize these individuals with appreciation and a round of applause. We certainly thank everyone for attending and supporting the symposium. Certainly appreciate those that have come from a little bit of a distance to our Kirksville community. We thank you certainly for being here, and if you want to leave a few dollars in the community, that's okay too. We don't mind. The symposium is certainly recognized as an outstanding tourism event. There's many in our area who appreciate you taking the time to be with us in our community. And at this time, I would like to introduce Ms. Carol Kellum. She's Vice President and General Manager of KTVO Television. Carol's leadership and support for the Missouri Livestock Symposium through KTVO Television is deeply appreciated. The success of the Livestock Symposium is absolutely directly linked to her help and her involvement. So we thank you, Carol, for all you do, and we also want you to extend a big thanks to your hardworking staff. It takes a lot of talented people to collaborate and to coordinate this event, and the folks at KTVO certainly make things a lot easier. Carol, I'd like to turn the microphone over to you.
Thank you. We do enjoy this event at the station. We enjoy getting involved, and the committee that we work with is incredible. It's always fun to work with Gary and Zach. Well, this year's symposium committee and KTVO teamed up to sponsor the photo contest to encourage amateur photographers in the state of Missouri to submit photos showing some aspect of agriculture. They could include farm life, farm scenes, or livestock. The photos were then displayed on the Missouri Livestock Symposium Facebook page. And of course, we'd like to thank all of those who entered. It wasn't a contest without you. The prize-winning photo is on the cover of the 2021 Missouri Livestock Symposium program book. And the winning photo this year, the photo contest, was titled Heading Home. And the winner is Jordan Deterding. And if Jordan would come down, there's a wonderful framed picture and some cold hard cash. So. Thanks again, Jordan. It's a great picture, and thanks again for coming, and I agree with Andy, leave cash in the city and in the county. We do appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Carol, and congratulations, Jordan. That's just a really cool picture, and I think the heading home fits the photo very, very well. We appreciate your talent and particularly your skill with your camera. We're all pleased to have with us tonight a friend of the symposium efforts. His name is David Baker. Once upon a time, David Baker was an assistant county agent in Logan County, Illinois. It's in Lincoln, Illinois. He moved to Missouri, and he served as assistant professor and safety and occupational health specialist. And during his professional career, he's provided leadership of commercial ag program at MU. He served as assistant dean and program director for CAFTR and agriculture and natural resources program director. He was an associate professor of MU Extension. He served in many positions at the University of Missouri and served as a consultant at one time for the Missouri Department of Ag. And now he has the mission as a consultant to assist others to build their organizational capacity. Some of the services that he is able to offer include visioning, strategic planning, leadership development, advocacy training, needs assessment, logic models, etc. It's a mixed methods program evaluation. David Baker Consulting is a collaborative venture with his wife, Dr. Robin Long. And over the years, we have certainly enjoyed many conversations and many stories and many appeals, and we've enjoyed a lot of wine with David Baker. So please welcome to the stage our friend, Dave Baker.
Andy, I don't know where the heck you got that, because I sure didn't write it. Well, one, I want to congratulate and thank all of you for being here tonight. I want to thank Chris, who I worked with for a while, who still stayed around even though I'm going to be on the program. But tonight is a distinct honor of mine to have this opportunity to introduce your recipient of the Livestock Symposium Lifetime Achievement Award. Before I do that, I want to make a few comments about this award and what it came with. Now, this award came as a result of 22 years of work at the Livestock Symposium. And I can guarantee you that when Gary and Bruce first met for the first time, they didn't envision that this symposium would be what it is today. And I want to thank Gary and Andy, as I call them, the mafia of the Livestock Symposium, and Zach's their assistant. The three of them have provided the leadership of this symposium to be what it is today, one of the premier events that we have in the state and also have regionally. But it's grown. When Gary and them started the program, it was targeted to Northeast Missouri. The livestock producers in Northeast Missouri to provide them the best educational programs we could. It's grown into a statewide event, and not only a statewide event, a regional event. There are faculty that come from all over the country. Far west is California, and as far east is the East Coast. We've had people here at the symposium as experts and farmers from all over the states surrounding this event. So the committee made a decision this year to move this award to a single award. And that award is designed to recognize an individual or an organization that has a well-documented program of leadership for the industry and commitment to grow this industry's economic viability and sustainability. It's extremely important as we look at this state. We're the number 2 cow, well, number 3 cow-calf state. Number 2 when I left administration, but we're now number 3. So as we look at that, the quality of animals that we have in this state have improved dramatically. All you gotta do is look at the surrounding states and see the kind of animals they produce. I spent a couple of weeks in North and South Dakota, and I tell you what, there's not animals out there, the quality that we have in this state. It's all a result of the person we're going to recognize today, and the faculty and others that he's worked with over the years, the College of Veterinary Medicine, and the Department of Economics on the University of Missouri, and the field faculty like Zach and others that are here tonight. So what I want to do tonight is introduce this year's recipient, make a few comments about it, and I'd ask David Patterson, Dr. David Patterson, to come forward and receive his recognition as the 2021 Lifetime Achievement Award winner from the Missouri Livestock Symposium. Gary, Stanley. Gary's going to present the award. I'm going to make a few comments about David. That ought to be scary, David. Because in 1996, when you came here, I was part of the hiring team that hired you. So anything that's went wrong, you can blame it on me, but everything's went well. It's one of the great decisions I ever made to have that. Dave is a curator's professor, a chancellor's professor in the Department of Animal Science at the University of Missouri. He came from out west. He grew up in the state of Montana. He has 2 degrees from Montana State University, his PhD from Kansas State University. He is an associate, well, he's housed in the Department of Animal Science, Division of Animal Science at the University of Missouri, and is in charge of, he retired when, last year? 2019, so 2 years ago. He has been retired, but he's still been actively involved in the department. The program that he's being recognized for is the Missouri Showman Select program. And I was one of those administrators that he came to ask for money early on. But I can tell you what, it was a well-designed program, it was well laid out, and it started with 3 people that he worked with in the field. All of you know Al Kennedy, northeast part of the state, Roger Akins in the southern part of the state, and Ellen Cole, who's still working for Extension at 81 or 82 years old, 50 plus years of work at Extension, still doing a great job in the southwest part of the state. That model developed out of that involved veterinarians both on campus and the field. As a matter of fact, there's been somewhere between 600 and 900 veterinarians in the state involved in various aspects of the program over the years to time. It's a prime example of why land-grant universities exist. To transfer the research knowledge that they gain on campus and the other land-grants throughout the country to the producers in this state. I spent a little time overseas in Australia and New Zealand working on the pasture-based dairy program for years. They always complimented about the fact that the Extension Service was there, that transfer piece, to transfer the research, and they missed it in those countries so they didn't have it. Well, what David started is turned into what I call the black and gold standard of heifer development. And that program has gained national recognition, it's wanted to be modeled by other states, and has produced us, or we're producing heifers that nobody else can do in the country. There are 133 heifers enrolled in that, or 153,000 heifers enrolled in that program. 39,000 of those animals have been sold through what we call sanctioned sales. The rest have been sold by private breeders to improve the herds in the state. And it's generated somewhere in the area about $59 million. That's through the direct sales. The ag economists in me, or not in me, and others on campus, would multiply that number about 6 or 7 times look at the total economic impact of the state's ag industry. So take that 60 and it's almost 42 or $420 million of economic impact that program's had on this state. We've sold animals and have animals in 110 or 114 counties. The 2 of them in the boot heel, one in the Dennis center part of the state, one of them around St. Louis. Haven't had them at this point in time. We've had people bid on those animals from all 114 counties. We have those animals in 21 states at this point in time, and I think, David, you take great pride in what you've done to improve the program. Now, David received, and if you look at this, Dr. Middleton talks about economic development. David received the University President's Award for Economics, which is the top award they give for economic development. He's one, and I love this, one of 50 Missourians you should know, by the Kansas City Business Times. He was Man of the Year for Missouri Agriculture in 2001. He has received 21 years of funding from the National Institute for Food and Agriculture, USDA. He's the first faculty member that I'm aware of with an extension appointment that received an award for an integrated award. He received the Frederick Blackboard Mumford Outstanding Faculty Award, which is the top award we give at the College of Agriculture. He's received the Research Award from the National Association of Animal Breeders. He's received the C. Price Ratcher Memorial Fellowship Award, which is the top one of the awards the university gives for extension faculty especially. And he's a fellow of the American Society of Animal Science. So David, you've had a tremendous career, and we're very proud that you received this recognition tonight, and I want to congratulate you. We'll give you a chance to make some comments.
Well, Dave, I appreciate that. When Zach called me and told me that about the recognition, I was obviously very humbled by the announcement. But I do want to thank the Missouri Livestock Symposium for the recognition. It really is an honor. I've been fortunate over the 25 years that I've been at Mizzou. As Dave said, I grew up on a ranch in south central Montana, about 80 miles from the northeast entrance to Yellowstone Park. Never thought I'd spend the bulk of my career in the Midwest, but I have, and I've really enjoyed every moment of it. The list of things that Dave Dave mentioned relative to the heifer program and other accomplishments that our group has had at Mizzou really is a function of how the university is intended to work, which in all cases doesn't happen at many land-grant institutions. We would have not been able to implement the heifer program to the extent that we were able to without the administrative support of the College of Agriculture, but also a very close working relationship with the College of Veterinary Medicine. I've been privileged to be a member of our animal science faculty at the Division of Animal Sciences, and without too much hesitation, I would say that our reproductive biology group is one of the best, if not the best, in the U.S. In addition to the things that we've been able to accomplish as a result of support from our campus administration, we would not have been able to really realize some of those accomplishments without the support of our field staff. The way University of Missouri Extension is organized with field specialists in terms of scattered around the state in various regions, those are really the key players in terms of the educational conduit that's created in terms of implementing improvements that we've seen in beef herds across the state, both in terms of reproduction, genetics, management, and nutrition. In addition to that, as Dave mentioned, we've had very active support from, and it's been a team effort related to the College of Veterinary Medicine. In many respects, we rely heavily on our veterinary community across the state to help us translate information from campus out to farms and ranches across the state, and it's really been an excellent partnership. The other thing that I've been fortunate over the course of my career at Mizzou is to have just an outstanding set of graduate students. I actually have 2 students now that are faculty members, one in the Animal Science Department, Jordan Thomas, that took my position, but in addition, a new faculty member at the College of Veterinary Medicine in the Department of Anatomy. What we've been able to accomplish in terms of many of the things statewide relative to the support from our graduate program is the fact that all of the students that I had were actually Missouri students, or natives of Missouri. And so the thing that's exciting for me to see is those individuals going out and impacting the industry statewide. Of those 15, 8 of those actually were part of what we refer to as the dual program students. So they were accepted into the College of Veterinary Medicine, but then took a leave of absence from the vet school and then did the graduate program with me. In addition to all of the other folks, all of those groups that I've listed, I've really benefited from working with the producers involved with the heifer program statewide, but all the other farms and ranches that we've worked with collaboratively over the years that I've been at Mizzou in terms of our reproductive work related to fixed-time artificial insemination and really impacting the capital of the state in terms of improved genetics. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I wouldn't have been able to do a lot of the things that we've been successful in seeing through without the support of just a great family. My parents instilled a lot of great things in me growing up on the ranch in Montana, but I've been blessed with a wonderful wife and two just great sons. And so with that, again, I want to thank the Missouri Livestock Symposium for this recognition, and it's very sincerely appreciated, so thank you.
Certainly, we extend congratulations to Dr. Patterson, and these are certainly outstanding achievements, and I know it's just a tremendous, important program. I know that our Zach Irwin is certainly very, very involved, and we just can say congratulations to you, Dr. Patterson. So I want you to remember that the doors to our trade show open at 8 tomorrow morning, and our educational programs begin at 9. We have a great lineup of speakers, certainly from coast to coast, as we mentioned, all the way from UC Davis. We are so pleased. So don't miss the opportunity to hear from some of the best in the livestock industry on beef cattle, horses, meat, goats, sheep, forages, stock dogs, as well as talks on the new opportunities in carbon markets. I encourage all of you to look to page 39 and 40 in your program book when you have time, and you will see an evaluation form. We wish for everyone to complete that evaluation, remove it from the book, and share your opinion with the committee. There's a box at the registration desk that you can leave your evaluation. Also, we'd like to have you make note that there have been some room changes for the horses, meat, goats, and sheep sessions. So they're posted on the schedule board. So be certain and look for those changes that we've had to make within the classroom situations. So now at this time, I would like to invite to the podium a young man who seems to be wise beyond his years. He provides hands-on assistance to area producers that are involved in the Show Me Select Heifer program we were just talking about. That enables increased net income for area cattle operations. He's been recognized by Missouri Farm Bureau as the outstanding extension specialist of our state. He's a mentor to many in his professional circle of agricultural educators. This young man is certainly an essential leader of this symposium event. He stands tall, not only in physical stature, but he's tall in the eyes of many as he provides knowledge and guidance and wisdom in many ways. So please welcome our University of Missouri Extension Livestock Specialist for the Northeast region, Zach Irwin.
Thank you very much, Andy. I always struggle with introductions. You know, we can read biographies all day long, and those are very important. The accomplishments of an individual or a man or a woman. But I talked to Frank beforehand, and Dr. Mitloehner, I said, what would you like me to introduce you? He said, I don't care, just keep it short. Okay? So I'm going to try to do that. I've been chasing Dr. Mitloehner, or at least following him for the last couple of years. His message is very interesting to me, in the parallels of life and science and public policy. And Dr. Mitloehner comes to us tonight with a message that I would like everybody to not just listen to, but hear when you look at how science can influence public policy. And if there's anything that we've learned over the last year and a half, is how much public policy can influence your lives and your livelihoods. And Dr. Mitloehner's message tonight hopefully resonates with everybody in the livestock business of how what research says can change public policy and how that public policy can affect you all as livestock producers. And so I am very excited. I'll just do that on the ground, that'll be all right. Very excited tonight to bring Dr. Mitloehner to Kirksville, Missouri. Has what I would call one of the foremost leading experts in research on animals and greenhouse gas production and the effect on the climate. And he comes to us with a wealth of experience, master's degree in agriculture engineering and animal science, PhD in animal science from Texas Tech. Currently conducts a lot of research related to air quality and livestock production, and specifically greenhouse gas production and quantification of ammonia, dust, and odor emissions. So, without further ado, I would like you to welcome Dr. Frank Mitloehner of the Missouri Livestock Symposium.
Good evening, everybody. Is my mic on? No? Mic is not on. My mic is not on. All right. Test, 1, 2. Now my mic is on. So, good evening, Missouri. Good evening. I came to you all the way from California, and that's 3 o'clock in the morning. I call California the land of nut and nutters. Right? I think you can, we will agree readily that California is probably the ground zero of a lot of the public policy affecting agriculture in the country. And I've been there now for 20 years. I'm not a native from California, I'm a native from Germany, did my degrees there, came to Texas, did my PhD there in Lubbock, and then we went from Lubbock, Texas to Davis, California. Well, that is a contrast, I can tell you. That is a contrast. And then arrived in Davis 20 years ago. So I am a professor, I teach and do research, and I'm also an extension specialist. And I'm specialized in the environmental impact of livestock. And quantifying those impacts and mitigating those. Today I will talk to you about livestock and climate. That is really a topic that is pretty hot. Whether you personally believe that livestock has an impact on climate is not really the question here. The question is, what do we know so far? What have we learned? And how does what we have learned affect public policy? And with that, sooner or later, your business. So, this is probably not my day today. Still here it is. There you go. 2 years ago, people asked me, Frank, why are you not on Twitter? And I said, on Twitter? Because I'm not stupid. What can I write in 280 characters that's meaningful? Boy, was I silly to have waited so long, because now I interact with a lot of people. 3 million impressions on this Twitter account a month. So I reach a lot of folks that I normally wouldn't reach. Journalists, politicians, the public at large, and not just agricultural stakeholders. It's really important that we are not just talking inward to people in agriculture, but that we talk to the outside world. And that to me is of critical importance. GHG Guru is my handle. I've established a center at UC Davis called the Qir Center. The Qir Center is half research, so I have postdocs, PhD students, and so on there. But the other half of the Qir Center, so research is one side, the other half of the Qir Center is in communications. And here I have hired journalists to work with me and for me, and that to me is critically important, because if there's one thing that we are really bad in agriculture, it is communication. That is the one thing we don't do well. We are producing food in ways that make us the envy of the world. But when we talk about how we produce food, we don't score well. And I think everybody in the room will agree at some level that that's the case. So I have established this center there. It's now a multi-million-dollar center for research and communication, and we are making a difference now. We are getting into not just mass media outlets and so on, but we are also a significant voice on social media. And that is very important if we want to reach teenagers and college student age groups, as well as journalists and other influencers. So I actually have communication with people like AOC, with people who I never thought I would have communications with, but I do. And that's good and that's important. That's good and that's important. So, when people talk about agriculture and greenhouse gases, agriculture and climate, they oftentimes use global numbers, global statistics. Such as this one here, global statistics for greenhouse gases that affect climate show that the vast majority, the lion's share of greenhouse gases globally are associated with energy. And that really means fossil fuels, oil, coal, and gas, extraction, and then the burning of those things. Agriculture overall has approximately 20% or so of total contribution to greenhouse gases. Globally. And I'm saying that, and I'm pointing that out, and I'm emphasizing it, because much of our mainstream media uses that global number to tell people in the United States that because that number is so high, people need to change what they eat. And that is disingenuous, because that global number is not representative of what livestock's contribution to climate are in the United States. The EPA estimates that in the United States, livestock contributes to a total of 4%. And that's beef, dairy, sheep, goats, poultry, everything combined, 4%. Now that's not nothing, that's something, but it's certainly not rivaling the fossil fuel sector responsible for 80%, 80. So it's important that we know what our contributions are. We have contributions. We do produce greenhouse gases. And the number one greenhouse gas that we produce in animal agriculture is methane. Today I will first talk to you about methane. And while some of that information is pretty technical, it is really important to get the take-home messages. And then I will also talk a little bit about global scenarios and in and around sustainability. This concept, this slide here is one of the most important ones. It shows something titled the global warming potential. And the global warming potential is the potency of a gas to trap heat from the sun. The way with which a gas can trap the heat, the solar radiation from the sun. This global warming potential is an old matrix. It's from 1990. It has been used ever since. And when you use that unit for animal agriculture, it makes animal agriculture look pretty bad. That is why we hear a lot of the reporting about livestock being a major contributor to warming in the United States. Why? Because it says that methane is 28 times more potent in trapping heat from the sun than CO2, carbon dioxide. It also then describes nitrous oxide, another greenhouse gas, as even more heat trapping. Just to give you an analogy, because I love analogies, how can you really understand that really well? Imagine taking coffee in the morning and putting it into 3 beverage containers. The one is a styrofoam cup, the other one is a China cup, and the third one is a Starbucks $20 insulated cup. You put the coffee into those 3 beverage containers, we all know it stays warm different length of time. These greenhouse gases are similar. When they are hit by a solar beam from then they trap the heat, but in different intensities, with methane being much more heat trapping than CO2 and nitrous oxide even more so. This is where the story ends in the media, and this is where it shouldn't end, because there's much more nuance to this discussion. This GWP 100, which I will refer to throughout my presentation, would suggest that methane is simply a greenhouse gas on steroids, okay? A very potent greenhouse gas, which it is. I call methane the fast and furious. Furious because of the potency it has. But thank God, methane is also short-lived. It's not just produced, but there's a process that destroys methane. And this is oftentimes overlooked. On this slide here you see the global methane budget. And this is a really important concept to get. You see here on the left side that methane is produced by various sources, including fossil fuel production and use, agriculture and waste, biomass burning, wetlands and so on. All of these sources produce methane. And these sources amount to a total of approximately 560 teragrams of methane per year, globally. So these are sources that net produce 560 teragrams of methane globally. This is where the story ends in the public discourse. Not acknowledging that methane is not just produced, but on the right side you see that methane is also destroyed. They are not just sources, but they are also sinks. And now look at that number under sinks. There are 550 teragrams of methane destroyed globally. 560 produced, 550 destroyed. You need to look at the difference between both, and then you see what the net is. And the net is 10 teragrams. Still a number that's too high that we seek to further reduce, but certainly a number that's drastically different than if you were just to consider the sources. So please remember, methane, in contrast to other greenhouse gases, such as CO2 and nitrous oxide, methane is not just produced, but methane is also destroyed. There is an atmospheric removal of methane. And if you look at this large arrow pointing down, it says, sink from chemical reactions in the atmosphere. Now, I don't want to make this a chemistry 101 here, but it's important to explain that briefly. When a methane molecule is in the air, it takes about a decade for that molecule to meet another molecule called a radical. And this radical kills the methane. It steals the hydrogen away from the methane and kills it. And that happens within a decade. And that makes methane so different from other greenhouse gases, namely that it is very short-lived. This is a fact that is most often overlooked, but it is critically important for animal agriculture to understand because it determines the true impact of animal agriculture on climate. Methane is not just produced, methane is also destroyed. Please remember that. Here's what I referred to before, how greenhouse gases warm our planet. What you see here is the sun radiating down solar beams to the surface of the earth, and with it comes heat. Normally that solar radiation would be reflected back into space if there weren't these so-called greenhouse gases. Gases such as CO2, methane, nitrous oxide. They basically form a blanket over our atmosphere, retaining the heat from the sun in our atmosphere. Ladies and gentlemen, without greenhouse gases, life on Earth would not be possible. It would be way too cold here. We need greenhouse gases. But the problem now is that human activity is producing too many of those. This blanket is getting too thick, and that's where the problem resides. So greenhouse gases form a shield over our atmosphere, pretty much a blanket, which just like a blanket you put over your body, retains the heat that comes in our atmosphere, okay? So now, most climate scientists will tell you that this greenhouse gas, CO2, is the main culprit of climate change, of a changing climate. But those people who have a beef with livestock, I sometimes call them our special friends, those people say, no, it's not CO2, it's methane that we need to concentrate on because of its potency, because there's 28 times more heat trapping than CO2. They do not acknowledge the atmospheric removal of this gas, okay? So let's now unravel this and explain the true nature of methane and why that matters to you. And I think it profoundly matters to you. So what I just said, the fact that methane is not just produced but also destroyed, leads to the fact that methane has a very short lifespan. CO2 has a lifespan of 1,000 years. So in other words, if you drive a car tonight, and you burn gasoline, then you'll put CO2 into the atmosphere. That CO2 in the atmosphere will stay there for 1,000 years. Every time you have ever burned fossil fuels, which are oil, coal, and gas, you produce CO2, put it in the atmosphere. And all of that is still there. And all of the stuff your parents and grandparents have emitted with respect to CO2 after burning fossil fuel, all of that is in the atmosphere as well. And it stays there for that long a time, for 1,000 years. But methane is different. Methane stays in the atmosphere for a little over a decade, and then it's gone. And you will see in a minute why that really matters for the accounting of that gas. So remember, because of this atmospheric removal of methane, methane has a short lifespan, making it a short-lived climate pollutant. And now I explain how methane gets its carbon and where that carbon, where it comes, where it goes. So, first of all, what is methane? Methane is CH4. Where does the carbon in the CH4, where does that come from? Well, the journey starts with photosynthesis, or the question, what plants need to grow? Plants to grow need sunlight, water, and a source of carbon. The source of carbon is atmospheric CO2. Plants suck that CO2 out of the air, and we learned it in school. They then produce oxygen, and they produce carbohydrates. So plants take CO2 out of the air, and they produce carbohydrates, such as cellulose or starch, both. And then, let's say, a cow comes along and eats some of that above ground vegetation, and then in her rumen produces methane gas. It's not her doing it, it's the microbes doing it, okay? Methane-forming microbes produce the methane, and the cow belches that methane out. Some of that methane also comes from her manure. That methane, CH4, is not new carbon added to the atmosphere. The carbon in the methane, the C in the methane, is nothing but recycled carbon that used to be in the atmosphere before in the form of CO2. It's not new carbon added to the atmosphere as long as the herd size is constant. Let's say if Missouri would have had relatively constant beef and dairy and so on herds over the last 20, 30 years, then the amount of methane produced by those animals and the amount of methane destroyed through atmospheric removal would have roughly been in balance, meaning no additional carbon added to the atmosphere, meaning no additional warming added to the atmosphere. A constant livestock herd, remember that, a constant livestock herd does not add additional warming to our planet. You only get additional warming from methane when you increase the source over time. Let's say you have a certain region, you used to have 1 million animals, and you grow that to 1.5 million. Then you increase methane over time, and that would increase warming. But if you keep your inventory stable, then you are not increasing warming. So what happens to that methane? I told you it breaks down. There's this process called hydroxyl oxidation. That is where these radicals steal the hydrogen from methane, and then they convert that into CO2 again. Now you might ask me, well, is that a good or bad thing? You just said methane has a lifespan of a little over a decade. CO2 has one of 1,000 years. That is not so much the question. The question is, do constant livestock herds add additional carbon and hence additional warming to our planet? And the answer is no, they do not. That carbon that we find in methane is biogenic. It's coming from atmospheric, going through plants, through animals becomes methane, and then it goes back to CO2. This whole cycle takes a little over a decade. How is this cycle here? How is this methane picture for livestock similar or different from other main sources of greenhouse gases, such as the fossil fuel sector? Well, it's profoundly different. Fossil fuels, first of all, what are they? Oil, coal, gas. There used to be forests and animals, such as dinosaurs, a long, long time ago, which died, decayed, fossilized. And over the last 70 years, over the last 70 years, humans have extracted approximately half of all that carbon from the ground. We have either dug it out or we have pumped it out. That's a lot of carbon. And where's that carbon now? What did we do with that carbon? We burned it, right? So where's that carbon that was down there for so long? Where's that carbon now? It's now in the atmosphere, and every time the sun hits it, these things warm up. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the main culprit of a changing climate. The use of fossil fuel and the production of CO2. This, ladies and gentlemen, is not a short-lived process of 10 or so years. This is a process of millennia, okay, of carbon accumulating underground for a long, long time. We are extracting it, we are burning it with cars, trucks, trains, planes, ships, and we are sending it into the atmosphere. And that is the reason why CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere go up, 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 and up year after year. Even last year during lockdown, with 40% of all of us globally staying at home, even at that time, CO2 concentrations globally went up. Why? Because they can only go up because CO2 accumulates and it stays in the atmosphere for 1,000 years. If you burn less fossil fuel, you add fewer CO2, but you're still adding CO2. That's not the same as methane. A group of colleagues of mine from Oxford University in the UK said the way we are currently accounting for methane's impact on climate is wrong. They said, and I totally agree, but I've been saying this for years, that we must account for methane in a budgetary way. Because it's not just produced, it's produced and it is destroyed. We cannot go to our banker and say, from now on you just consider my income and not my expenses, right? But that's what we're doing. That is what we are doing with methane. We are acting as if it were just produced and not destroyed, and that's not true. So these colleagues from Oxford said, first, that the way we currently estimate methane's impact on warming, the so-called GWP 100 that I showed you before, that this old matrix is significantly problematic and wrong by overestimating constant sources of methane by a factor of 3 to 4. I repeat that because it's so important. These Oxford scientists said that if you have a constant, let's say a constant cattle herd over 20, 30 years, a constant herd, a constant source of methane, and you now calculate the impact of that cattle herd on global temperature, using this old unit GWP 100, then you are overestimating its impact by a factor of 3 to 4. When I gave that presentation, I gave it hundreds of times, people said, maybe this Mitloehner guy is too close to industry, maybe, you know, whatever, they came up with all different kinds of reasons why I said that. But the reason why I said that was because it deeply concerns me. It deeply concerns me that we are listening to a smoke screen that's built up, that puts the focus onto agriculture and away from the true sources of a changing climate. And that is a dangerous movement. It also suggests to people that they need to change what they eat, or else our Earth will go to shreds due to climate change. So, these colleagues of Oxford suggested a new matrix called GWP star. This GWP star accounts for both production and destruction of methane. And it is a measure of the true warming impact of methane. So, to my great pleasure, about a month ago, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, IPCC, many of you have heard the name, the world's leading body on climate, has confirmed what I just told you, that using the old unit GWP 100 drastically overblows the impact of constant sources of methane by a factor of 3 to 4. You can't read that down there, but it's right here. And for those of you who are nerds like I am, it's page 123 of the IPCC report titled AR6. It's now in there, okay? And I couldn't be happier about it. And GWP star is now mentioned in this IPCC report as a preferred method to quantify the warming impacts of sources such as livestock. So to me this is really important, and I hope that you understand why that is such a significant change. I will now explain the difference between a gas such as CO2 versus a gas such as methane. Because when you get asked, well, why is methane so different, you want to have an answer to that. So imagine you were to drive from home to work, assuming that you have to drive to go to work, let's say 20 miles on Monday. When you drive your car, you burn gas, you produce CO2, it goes into the atmosphere. It stays there pretty much forever. On Tuesday you drive again and you add a similar amount of CO2 to the atmosphere, which is now in addition to what you put out on Monday, which is still there, of course. On Wednesday you drive again, and you get the gist of it. Every time you drive your car, every time you burn fossil fuel, you add to the existing stock of the previous day, or days, or weeks, or months, or years, decades, and so on. It is a gas that accumulates in the atmosphere because of its long lifespan of 1,000 years. CO2 is therefore called a stock gas, because every time you add CO2, you add to the existing stock of that gas. Currently, and I can't tell you how happy I was when I heard the members of the legislature in the room, because that's very important for you when you consider rulemaking and so on, legislative actions. Currently, methane is treated as if it were a stock gas too, as if it were to accumulate just like CO2 does. But it doesn't. Methane does not accumulate in the atmosphere. Methane is produced and destroyed, and that makes methane a flow gas. An equal amount of methane that's produced is also destroyed. If you have a constant source of methane, you do not add additional warming. I will now give you another analogy. I already told you I love analogies. Imagine two bathtubs. One is the bathtub for CO2 and how CO2 warms the planet. The other one is the bathtub for methane. First, the CO2 bathtub. That is the bathtub that has a faucet and it has a drain. And the drain is always open. The drain is always open. If you now turn that faucet on normal, water runs in, but an equal amount is drained through that open drain. As a result, what happens to the water level? It stays stable. If you turn the faucet down or low, but your drain is still open, what happens to the water level now? It goes down. So if we reduce methane, then we can have negative warming, i.e. cooling. Only if we turn that faucet up all the way, we can get into a situation where we add more water to that bathtub than we let go of from the drain. And then levels can rise. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a situation that we see in parts of the world, namely in developing countries, where increasing demand for animal source foods is met by growing livestock herds, drastically growing livestock herds. But it's not happening in countries like ours. So, remember, CO2 is a stock gas, methane is a flow gas. The one accumulates in the atmosphere, the other one does not. And now comes one of my last nerdy slides. After that, it becomes much more relaxing, I promise. Imagine the following three scenarios over a period of 30 years. The first scenario is one where methane, by whatever source, could be cattle, over 30 years increases by 35%. The second scenario is one where methane slightly decreases. It's relatively stable over 30 years. Maybe we reduce it by 10%. And the third scenario is one where over 30 years we reduce methane strongly, let's say by 35%. How would the increasing, the stable, and the decreasing amount of methane be depicted using this old matrix GWP100 that has been used for the last 30 years? GWP100 erroneously would assume that in all three scenarios, the increasing, stable, and decreasing scenario, we would add a lot of additional greenhouse gases and hence a lot of additional warming to our planet. It does not account for the atmospheric removal of methane. Now I show you what this new matrix from Oxford, the GWP star, would predict. GWP star would predict that yes, when you increase methane, you're adding a lot of additional warming to our planet, and that's the blue north of the x-axis here. But if you don't increase but slightly decrease methane over 30 years, then you don't see any blue of the north of the x-axis. You don't see any blue here, meaning there's no additional warming. In fact, because there's a slight reduction here by 10%, you see a negative sign in front of the number, meaning if you slightly reduce methane over 30 years, you induce negative warming, meaning cooling. No additional warming from constant cattle herds, and if you slightly reduce, then you're even pulling a little bit of carbon out of the air. When you strongly reduce methane by 35%, look what happens. We now see a lot of blue south of the x-axis, meaning if you strongly reduce methane, you are pulling carbon out of the atmosphere much as if you were to plant forests. Because we know trees take CO2 out of the air, right, during photosynthesis. Pastures do the same thing. If you reduce methane, you do the same thing too. But with an immediate impact on warming. With an immediate impact on warming. So the reason why I show you this is because it's so important that people understand why methane is so different from other gases. I promised you that the previous slides was the last nerdy one, but this is actually the last nerdy one here. Imagine a power plant over 30 years or so producing increasing amounts of power. As a result, this power plant would produce increasing amount of CO2 over time. That increasing amount of CO2 over time would lead to an exponentially increasing amount of warming. Let's say you now look at a feedlot producing some methane, and at first the feedlot had 10,000, later 15,000 cattle, so an increasing inventory of cattle. That would lead to an increasing amount of methane over time, and that would lead to a similar increase of warming. So we do not want to increase the source of methane because that would lead to increasing amounts of warming. But if we keep both constant CO2 and methane, let's say our power plant were constant in how much power it produces and therefore how much CO2, then the related warming from that CO2 would still go up. Why would it go up? Because this gas is cumulative. It goes up that pyramid I showed you before. But look what happens when you have a constant source of methane, such as a constant cattle herd. We've been having a constant beef herd and a constant dairy herd in the United States for a long time. In fact, we've gone down in numbers pretty drastically in the United States over the last 40, 50 years. When you hold your methane stable, you don't have any additional warming as a result. Stable methane sources do not add additional warming. But now look what happens. When you decrease CO2, let's say our power plant were to shut down eventually. First you ramp it down and then you shut it down. Then even though you reduce CO2 over time, look what happens to the warming. Even though you reduce the CO2, the warming still goes up all the way to the point where you shut down the power plant. Only then the related warming stabilizes, plateaus. That's why the world talks about net zero for fossil fuel sources. Only when we shut down fossil fuel consumption completely, the related warming stays stable. It doesn't go down, it just stays stable. But look what happens to methane. When we reduce methane, we have an instantaneous reduction of warming. Instantaneous reduction of warming. People ask me, Frank, isn't methane a super pollutant? Isn't methane the 800-pound gorilla? And I say, in my opinion, CO2 is a super pollutant. Why? Because even if we reduce CO2, even if we reduce it, the warming still continues. Whereas, in my opinion, methane is a super opportunity. Because if we find ways to reduce that gas, then we have an instantaneous impact on climate. So the question you will now have is, can we do it? Can we reduce methane? I don't want anybody to walk out of this room saying Mitloehner says methane doesn't matter. Methane doesn't matter. But in my opinion, methane is a real opportunity for agriculture. And you will see in a few seconds why I say that. I just want to rekindle your memory here. When you have a strong reduction of methane, this is what happens. You're pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. You are reducing warming. Now the question is, can we do that? I told you I'm from the state of nuts and nutters. But in the one case, the last few years, our legislature did something that was remarkable. They came up with a law that at first looked draconian to our farmers. It's called SB 1383. This law mandates a 40% reduction of methane, 40, to be achieved by the year 2030. And our farmers went wild when they heard that. Little did they know that the legislature had a plan for how to achieve that 40% reduction goal, namely, to not use the cane approach of rules and regulations and fines, but to use the carrot approach. Financially incentivizing reductions of methane. Financially incentivizing reductions of methane. And that worked. What you see on this slide here is a dairy. I know most of you are interested in beef, but California is really not just a nut state. Of course, it's also a very significant, well, the most significant dairy state in the country. Many of our dairies are large. And dozens of them have recently covered their lagoons, their liquid manure storage. These covered lagoons, also referred to as anaerobic digesters, capture the gas that comes off the animal manure. They trap the gas. This gas is called biogas. 60% of that biogas is methane, by the way, and methane is flammable. So now, they don't let that gas go into the atmosphere, they trap it underneath the tar, and then they convert the biogas into fuel. They convert the biogas from the animal manure into a fuel type called RNG, renewable natural gas. And this renewable natural gas is then sold off to vehicle fleets, such as semi-truck fleets. This conversion from biogas, dairy biogas, to RNG fuel for vehicles is considered the most carbon negative fuel type there is. As a result, our dairy farmers are now paid the so-called low carbon fuel standard credits. That's the mouthful. Low carbon fuel standard credits. And these low carbon fuel standard credits run at $200 per ton of CO2e. A dairy cow on average produces about $4,000 in Milk Valley. For the dairies that do what I just told you, they make an additional approximate $2,000 per cow from the biogas to fuel conversion. We have a gold rush in California that is exactly what I just told you. Producers rushing to install technologies to reduce methane. So far, the dozens of dairies that have jumped onto this have reduced methane by 2.2 million metric tons annually. That's 2.2 million metric tons of CO2 annually. And for those of you who want to know what that is percentage-wise, our dairy sector over the last few years has reduced its methane by 25%. They will achieve the 40% reduction. And here's what happens when they do achieve these reductions. The methane reductions, these strong methane reductions, will pull so much carbon out of the air, inducing negative warming, i.e. cooling, that this methane reduction will counteract other greenhouse gases, getting our dairy industry to a point of what I call climate neutrality. This sector will not affect the climate in any negative way. And once they have reached that point, they can even become carbon negative, pulling more carbon out of the air and selling these credits to fossil fuel users, such as Chevron, Texaco, and all the others. That's already happening. And it's not just manure management that can get us there, but there are also other things, such as feed additives. At UC Davis, I've done dozens of trials on feeding essential oils, tannins, seaweed, all different kinds of additives to cows, to cattle, and found that enteric reductions anywhere between 10 to 50% are possible. These additives are not commercially available yet, but they will be in 5 years. And many of them are very cost effective too, because they lead to better efficiencies, or they lead to higher components of milk, or they lead to other issues that generally are beneficial to the producer. So to me, and this is one of the main take-home messages for today's talk, to me, methane is much less of a liability than it is an asset. If you treat it well, if you treat it right, if you understand it well. It is not just a super pollutant, 28 times more potent than CO2, but it is a super opportunity because if you learn to reduce it, you can take those reductions to the market and you'll get paid for it. If you were to do what I just told you, reduce methane on your operation, you can sell your credits to the California market today. You do not have to be in California. You can be anywhere in the United States and sell your credits into the California market. And that is happening all over the place. I gave talks in Kansas, in Nebraska, all throughout the country, and I know that, particularly in the dairy sector, people are now considering how they can reduce methane because not just do they want to reduce their own footprint, but they want to financially benefit from it. So what exactly your mechanisms can be, I don't know. People like Zach can definitely help you figuring it out. So I will now totally swing this discussion around, okay, from greenhouse gases and carbon crediting and so on, to food security globally, because I think this is a very important topic. And then, we'll have another 10 or so minutes. What you see on this slide here is a development that I call the 2050 challenge. This is showing the global human population from the year 1750 to 2050, that's predicted, hence the name 2050 challenge. So you see, human population on Earth went up pretty drastically. I'm a little over 50. When I was a little boy, we were here at 3 billion people. When I was a little boy, we were at 3 billion people. Today, we are at 7.8 billion people. And by the time I'm an old man, we'll be well over 9 billion people. Meaning, throughout my lifetime, human population on this planet will have tripled. We will have 3 times more people on this planet by the time we're old compared to when we were young. And that, ladies and gentlemen, has a huge impact on the discussions around how we shall produce food. I live in Davis, California, I told you. I call it the People's Republic of Davis. And if I were to go to the farmer's market asking people, how do you think we should produce food? What should a swine farm look like, or a poultry farm or so? They would tell me, a swine farm with more than 50 pigs is a mega farm. It's a factory farm that they don't want. More than 200 chickens, not sustainable. Now, obviously, they're real experts. They want the red barn of the 1950s. They want that. They think that was the most sustainable time of our agricultural history. Little did they know that these animals were in tight stall barns, not able to walk around. The milk was milked with stoop labor, went into the next bucket where it's set for I don't know how many hours. Where did the manure go? Well, probably in the next creek or so, right? Financial sustainability didn't exist. Okay, so depicting that as the gold standard for sustainability is terrible in my opinion, yet I see those images depicted on every creamery truck I see every day. And I have to say, agriculture has done itself such a disservice to depicting that 1950 farm as the gold standard. And now trying to pedal back, saying, no, 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 what we do today is much better. Well, then don't depict that 1950 standard as being a gold standard. Going back to this one here. So you see the global human population increased by a lot, not so much in the developed world, that's US and Europe and so on, where human population is plateauing, but in the developing and emerging countries. And that is not a function of everybody having 5 or 10 babies. That is a function of mainly increasing life expectancies. People grow older, and we all want to grow older, but cumulatively that means more mouths to feed in the future. So the question now is, how do we feed these people without depleting all natural resources? This is one of my favorite slides. It shows the world from space, and it is circle over Southeast Asia. This circle, ladies and gentlemen, has more people in it than the rest of the world combined. More people live inside this circle than outside this circle. Certainly one of the food security hotspots of the world, and a very important market for places like Missouri. On this slide here you see that Southeast Asia is not the only area in the world with drastically increasing human population. Africa is even more growing human population-wise. The Americas are relatively stable and Europe is slightly shrinking. So we have two hotspots in the question of how we produce food in the future. Here you see Africa blowing up a little bit. Each country marked in red is a country in Africa that has a human population increase of over 100%, meaning every decade human population in these countries doubles. And they are currently not feeding their people enough. Every 10 years population doubles in these countries, okay? And don't think that's their problem. We can just do our thing here and they'll do their thing. That is not how this works anymore, okay? When people don't have food, they will migrate. They will migrate. Take my word for it. I told you I'm a native from Germany, and 2 years ago or so, I witnessed how hundreds of thousands of people just rushed in the country of Germany, totally overwhelming all social and other systems. And they came from the Middle East and North Africa. Here you see an image showing the world's arable land, those pieces of land where we can grow food for people to eat. And as you can see, that's not very much. I want to show you a little trick that really explains well how limited we are globally with respect to land to grow crops and to grow food. So this is just a standard sheet of paper here, okay? Standard sheet of paper. This is the size, the area of the entire Earth. If I now fold this standard sheet of paper, and I fold it twice, you now see approximately a postcard-sized piece of paper. This is all land in the world. The whole sheet is the entire Earth. This here is all land. The difference is ice and water and so on. So this is all land. This is a business card and the equivalent of agricultural land. So this is all land in the world. This is all agricultural land in the world. And now I take this business card and I fold it into one piece that's 2/3 and the other piece that's 1/3, and then I rip it into pieces. So again, this is all agricultural land in the world. The bigger of the two pieces, the 2/3 piece, is all agricultural land that we call marginal agricultural land. This, ladies and gentlemen, is land that is used for agriculture, but you cannot grow crops here because it's too hilly, too rocky, not fertile enough, or there's not enough water. What do we do with this land today? Grazing. Why do we use it for grazing? Because ruminants are the only ones that can make use of that land, because the only thing that grows there is cellulose-containing grasses. And the only ones who can digest cellulose are ruminants. And yes, they have the unintended consequence of belching methane. But thank God, they can digest the world's most abundant feedstuff, which is grass containing cellulose. 2/3 of all agricultural land in the world, and by the way, also in the United States, is marginal land that can only be used by ruminant livestock. And the last third of this business card is the agricultural land that we call arable land. Here you can grow crops. That's how limited we are, okay? We have a tripling of human population in the world, and this is the reality. And now there are some of my special friends saying, hey, how about we get rid of livestock? Well, good luck with that. Good luck with that, because that would mean we could probably take that piece of land and make golf courses of it, but we cannot put this into food-growing directions, okay? So, anyhow, I hope that you remember that. Marginal land, arable land, okay? Ruminant livestock is a critical part of satisfying the 2050 challenge of feeding a tripling of human population without depleting all natural resources in our world. This slide here is a dairy depiction, but it applies just as well for beef. What it shows on the x-axis is the total amount of milk produced per cow per year, and on the y-axis you see the carbon footprint. What you see here are many diamonds, and these diamonds are data points. Each diamond is the data point for one country. What you see here is there are many countries with dairy cows that produce a tiny, tiny amount of milk. And as a result, they have a very high carbon footprint per unit of milk produced. And then you have other countries that produce a lot of milk. In the United States, we produce 23,000 pounds of milk per cow per year. In India, it's 1,000 pounds. You take approximately 20 cows in India to produce the same amount of milk as one cow here. Why? Because after they're productive, those cows in India, they're cut loose. Nobody eats them, they're cut loose. And they can just roam around freely for the remaining 15 years of their life or so. Eating and excreting, but not producing. I call that idle animals. Idle animals. This is like you running your car in your driveway, engine on, but you're not driving it. That's an idle car. An idle cow is just as bad, okay? That's a bad thing. And that happens in many, many parts of the world. Here you see the carbon footprint of milk production in different regions of the world. And you can see North America, we are the ones with the lowest carbon footprint, not the highest, meaning the lowest amount of greenhouse gases produced per unit of milk produced is here in the United States. How did we get to the point where we are today? Where we have shrunk livestock herds pretty drastically here in the United States and in other developed countries. We have improved reproduction, we have improved health, we have improved genetics, and we have learned to feed more energy-dense diets. And that combination has allowed us to shrink our livestock herds to historic lows. On the beef side, we used to have 140 million beef cattle. Today we have 90. But with this much smaller herd today, we are producing the same amount of beef as we used to. On the dairy side, we used to have 25 million dairy cows. Today we have 9 million dairy cows. We went from 25 to now 9, but with this much smaller herd today, we are producing 60% more milk. You know how many horses we have in the United States? Anybody want to guess? 9.5 million horses. We have more horses in this country than dairy cows. You know how many dogs and cats we have in the United States? Estimates are around 170 million dogs and cats. They are eating 1/3 of all animal source protein, our pets do. Because nobody will ever discuss horses, dogs, or cats and their environmental footprint, because they are our buddies, right? It's the cows. It's always the cows that get the brunt of everything. Our carbon footprint of a glass of milk has shrunk by 2/3 over the last 70 years. These developments we could replicate throughout the world. We could achieve what we have achieved in the United States throughout the world. That doesn't mean that we want to copy and paste US agriculture to the rest of the world, but we can help others make significant changes. I just told you the dairy sector in the United States has 9 million dairy cows today. In India, the number is 300 million. They have 300 million dairy cows in Buffalo in India. And that has a significant environmental footprint because many or most of them are idle. In China, I spent a lot of time in China. I have an academic appointment as an adjunct professor at a Chinese university. They are producing a lot of pigs. They are producing about half of the world's pigs, to be precise. 1 billion pigs per year are produced in China. What I find more staggering than that number is the fact that of the 1 billion pigs they produce, they have a pre-weaning mortality of 40%. 400 million pigs in China are produced and die pre-weaning, never make it to market. They have a pre-weaning mortality rate, a number in China, that is greater than all the pigs we produce in the United States. And that's China, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? China is highly developed compared to many other emerging and developing countries. Everybody here knows that, I assume. So I just want to show you that because this is a depiction of what happens in the United States versus one emerging country that's very developed already, but even that one has such big problems. Okay? We really have to reduce the livestock's impact on climate, on the environment. But not so much here, but in other parts of the world. And we can assist them. We can assist them to make that happen. So people also, a lot of my special friends, they say to me, Frank, why don't we just eat less meat and less dairy and less eggs and so on? Wouldn't that have much bigger impact than messing around with agriculture? And I said to them, well, we are not really eating much more beef than we have and much more red meat than we have. And they say, oh, yeah, we do. And I said, no, we don't. And here's the statistics. I have the statistics from 1909 until very recent. And you can see here that beef, over all these years, has remained very stable. That's consumption of meat. Consumption of total red meat has slightly decreased, but it is true that we're eating more meat. But what it is that we're eating much more of is chicken. We're eating 500% more chicken than we did 100 plus years ago. That is what has increased by a lot. One of my last slides, can we eat our way out of climate change? That is something that the media is drumbeating day in, day out. They are promoting the use of plant-based alternatives. They are saying we need to become vegetarians or vegans in order to save the climate, or in order to save whatever other environmental category. So I looked into what would happen if a person were to become vegan for a year. How much of a reduction in greenhouse gases would that cause? And sure enough, research has been done. If an omnivore were to go vegan for 1 year, that would reduce the carbon footprint of this person by 0.8 tons of greenhouse gases. Now you will ask, is that a lot or not? To give you a comparison, a few weeks ago I went to Europe, I flew to Europe, and one transatlantic flight per passenger causes 1.6 tons of greenhouse gases. So I would have to go vegan for 2 years to offset the emissions related to my one flight to Europe. See if that were to happen. But, just to give you a general idea, a meatless Monday in the United States would reduce greenhouse gases. But by how much? By 0.3%. The entire country were to forego animal source foods 1 day a week would lead to a 0.3% reduction. And if the entire country were to go vegan, that would reduce greenhouse gases by 2.6%. Just one notion here, I talked to the president of the Vegan Society of the United States not too long ago. And I asked that person, I told you I talked to anybody. And I asked this person, what is your greatest challenge, the greatest challenge of your organization? He said, by far the retention rate. And I said, well, can you explain? And he said, sure. Retention rate means how many people continue to eat that way after 1 year. And I said, what is the retention rate? And he said, 84%, 84, of vegetarians and vegans stay vegetarians and vegans for only 1 year and then revert back to being omnivores. 84%. And I said to him, if that were true, and you are telling me that, so it must be true, if that were true, then that would mean that for every active vegetarian and vegan, there are 5 former vegetarians and vegans. And he said, yes. You can't make this stuff up, really. Because in the media, that is portrayed as a gold standard that we should all aspire to, right? To me, a sustainable diet is one that people continue to eat and enjoy. I don't know why these people stop, whether it's a lack of taste, a lack of nutrition or else, but they stop. So please don't tell us that that is what we all need to eat for our world and our own health to improve. Now, my last slide. What is it that I think is the greatest environmental harm of our food system? It's depicted by this slide. This slide here shows a US family in front of all the food that's lost and wasted. 40% of the food that we produce in the United States, 40% of the food that's produced in all developed countries, and 40% of all the food produced in developing countries never makes it to a human digestive tract. In the developed world, those food waste, that food waste occurs at the consumer level, in our kitchens and restaurants. And in the developing world, it happens at the producer level, where farmers can't harvest on time, can't transport to the markets, and so on. But globally, we are wasting approximately 40% of all food. I think everybody here appreciates why that is absolutely ridiculous, and why this is not sustainable. If those people who drum the beat on methane and livestock and so on, if they really were interested in reducing our food impact on climate, on water, on air, and so on, they would look into this issue first and foremost. So, with that, I just want to point out that I write a blog. It's on this webpage here, the Qir Center webpage, and the Qir Center webpage has a lot of interesting explainers and blogs and all different kinds of information that you might find useful. With that, I spoke long enough. I thank you very much for your attention, and I'd be very happy to entertain any questions that you might have. Thank you.
How does water vapor stack up against your greenhouse gases?
The question is, how does water vapor stack up against greenhouse gases? It is a very important one. It is a dominant one, but it is also one that has been constant forever. Okay? Water vapor has not changed over the last few decades, and therefore, along with volcanoes and ocean and other natural sources of climate pollutants, that has not changed. That's the natural background. What has changed is the amount of carbon humans have put into the atmosphere, not the amount of water vapor or volcano gases or ocean gases and so on. So it's a good question, I get this often, but that is not what drives the increasing amount of warming that we see. Other questions? Yes?
What happens when the methane is degraded with the lifespan of 12 years? Where does that carbon go?
Yes. So when the methane is destroyed, where does the carbon go? The carbon that becomes methane comes from atmospheric CO2 and it goes back to atmospheric CO2. It comes from there and it goes back to there. This is really, really important, okay? People in agriculture really need to understand this biogenic carbon cycle and the fact that methane is not just produced but also destroyed. That is absolutely critical in our understanding of the impact of livestock and climate. Because we have a bullseye on us, okay? And that bullseye is a methane bullseye. And it is there for no good reason. But as I told you, I view this whole methane thing as more of an opportunity than a liability. But we have to get it right. And we have to learn how to communicate. Communicate with those people at the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and so on. And guess what? That is happening. It is happening. Yes?
You said that the carbon dioxide life expectancy in atmosphere is 1,000 years.
Yes.
How did you get that?
Oh, that's a good question. So the carbon dioxide lifespan is 1,000 years. How do we know? Right? How do we know? That's the question. So the answer to that is that you can see, you can study what the decay rate is, okay? How fast that molecule falls apart. And it basically doesn't fall apart. Okay? They could replace 1,000 years by it's in the air forever. It's in the air forever. They just use that number of thousand to say it's very long. It might be 10,000 years, we don't know that. But it is pretty much forever. Any kind of CO2 that has ever been put into the atmosphere by human activity is still there. Some of it has been taken on by plants, some of it has been taken on by soils and so on, but it's not destroyed. Farmers can actually make a difference with respect to CO2 by the way they treat their soils. I didn't talk about that at all because that's something for another talk, but the principle of soil carbon sequestration is one where agriculture can bank a lot because only agriculture and forestry are able to suck CO2 out of the air during photosynthesis with plants. That carbon goes from those plants into the roots of the plants and from the roots into the soil, where that carbon stays unless you till deep. When you till deep, then you release that carbon again. If you low-till or you no-till, then you leave that carbon in the ground. 1/3 of all human greenhouse gases can be trapped in our soils. And the key is in your hands for that. Yes?
What would be your ideas of addressing the 40% waste of food? What are a couple of ideas that we should...
Yeah, so the question is, what are my ideas with respect to how we can reduce the 40% reduction of food waste? Now, the majority of food waste in the United States occurs at the consumer level, in our households and in restaurants. So one issue is portion size. The portion sizes we get are ridiculous, okay? And you see that some of us, it shows.
Amen.
Portion sizes are one. The other issue that's considerable is sell-by stamps on our food. What you have on food items is not an expiration date, it's a sell-by date. But people think it means by the time that this date has arrived, you now need to toss that milk or whatever other food there is. And that is not true. You know how much food we throw away because that date has arrived? In Europe, they have an expiration date instead of a sell-by date. That's much better. In the future, we will have fridges which have a scanner. And every time you put a food item into your fridge, that fridge will know what food item that is and when it was put in there. And then every time you take something out, it will know how much you took out. And it will tell you how much of perishable food you still have in your fridge and you need to deal with. It will even give you recipes on how to cook it. You will see. You will see. If you think I'm just coming up with stories here, people are working on that as we speak, and I think that's fantastic. I love it. I love it. I've taken a lot of your time, but I'm very appreciative appreciative of your interest. So, do you have any other questions? Any other questions?
I have one.
Okay.
A lot of the people in this room also deal with row crops, and I know biofuels is another topic, but you talked about how the coal, you said oil, coal, gas, right? Is it three?
Yeah, oil, coal, and gas.
Okay, you talked about how when we take it out of the ground, fossil fuel that's millions of years old and put it up in the atmosphere. So when we were producing biofuels from our crops, biodiesel, ethanol, we should feel pretty good about that, right? Because it's crops that have harvested carbon from the air. And although when we burn it, we're putting it back in, it's more or less just replacing it, right? The cycle.
So the question here is, when we burn oil, coal, and gas, fossil fuels, then we are taking carbon from the ground and putting it into the atmosphere. If we now replace fossil fuels with renewable fuels, such as ethanol, corn ethanol, and so on, or biodiesel, then that's different. The answer is yes, that is different. The plants, while they're alive, suck carbon out of the air, they store it in the ground, but when we till that ground, we put that carbon back into the air. So that is pretty much a wash. So we're not sequestering with that. Okay, that's not carbon sequestration. If you have a ranch and you don't till the soil, then you are carbon sequestering. But now going back to your question. So if you have row crops of corn or soy or so, the biggest net input is through chemical fertilizers. And chemical fertilizers are energy intensive to being produced. And that is where that system has its greatest carbon footprint, through the fertilizers. And let's not forget, the reason why we're all talking about methane is because our special friends don't like livestock. That's why we're all talking about methane, okay? Because they think this is the Achilles heel of animal agriculture. But a much more important greenhouse gas is nitrous oxide. Because nitrous oxide is not short-lived, and nitrous oxide has a potency of 265. And nitrous oxide develops every time we put nitrogen into the ground, whether that is chemical fertilizer nitrogen or whether it's manure. Every time we put nitrogen in the ground, there are certain microbes that convert some of that and produce nitrous oxide. No focus has been on that because the vegetarians and the vegans and all of those guys, they don't really want to discuss that. And I don't want to make a big topic out of that, but I want people in farming, in agriculture, to be aware that this is actually a much bigger topic that is currently not politically hot, but that is much harder to handle than the methane part of the picture. Because I think methane we can deal with and we can reduce it, and when we reduce it, it has a quick impact. Nitrous oxide is pretty much the same as CO2, but it's more potent.
Is fertilizing with manure better than fertilizer?
Is fertilizing with manure better than commercial fertilizer? The answer is yes, because you don't have to put all that energy into producing that fertilizer that you would with chemical fertilizers. Yes, and when I showed you that little business card analogy here, 2/3 of my business cards being marginal land, 1/3 of the business card arable land. That arable land is 50% fertilized with chemical fertilizers. The other 50% is organic fertilizers, meaning that manure came out of some animal's butt. Okay. Thank God we have these animals, because otherwise we would have to have 100% chemical fertilizers for all of our arable land. I'll tell you one last very, very short episode of my daily life. So I teach a class at UC Davis with 300 students. And they come from urban centers like LA, San Francisco, Sacramento. And like every 20-year-old or so student population, we have about 10% vegetarians and vegans. Okay? And so I asked them at the beginning of the quarter, so how many of you are vegetarians and vegans? About 10% raised their hands. And I said, so when you go to the supermarket and buy food, what do you base your food buying decisions on? And they said, well, it has to be local, it has to be organic, it has to be humane, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, let's stop here. So you're saying you only buy vegan food? Yes. You only buy organic vegan food? Yes. So, well, that's not possible. Well, why not? Do you know that plants need to be fertilized? Yes. And the organic plants, the organic plants that you eat, cannot receive chemical fertilizers. Do you know that? Oh yeah, of course I know that. So if they can't receive chemical fertilizers, what are they fertilized with? So I don't know. But they are fertilized with animal manure. And they look at me and they cannot believe it. So the reason why you can buy organic crops is because there's animal agriculture. Without animal agriculture, your organic crops could not be fertilized. They could not be grown. So thank an animal farmer for allowing you to eat what you eat. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention.
So ladies and gentlemen, this does conclude our evening event. Thank you for being here. I want you to come back tomorrow for what should be a very, very, very good program. Thank you so much for being with us. Good night.